You get pulled over. Maybe you were driving 5 miles over the speed limit. The officer walks up to your driver's side window, asks for your license and proof of insurance, glances at them for a moment, then looks back at you with a relaxed smile and says, "So, where are you coming from tonight?" It sounds harmless. It sounds polite. It sounds like nothing more than casual conversation while the officer runs your information. And that's exactly why it may be one of the most dangerous questions you'll hear during a routine traffic stop. Because whatever comes out of your mouth next, the next few words you choose to say, can determine whether this ends as a simple warning or ticket, or whether it turns into the beginning of a much longer criminal investigation. After more than 2 decades of defending people in situations just like this, I've watched countless drivers answer that question without giving it a second thought. Most of them believed they were simply being cooperative. Most of them had no idea they had just stepped into a carefully planned conversation. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this seemingly innocent question can be so important, and why answering it the wrong way may put you in a position you never expected. And I'm not just going to expose the trap. I'm going to give you the exact words to use to shut all of this down when cops use this on you. And wait around to the end, because even if you answer this question right, I'm going to show you the 3 follow-up traps cops love to use and they plan to use before you even open your mouth. So, let's cut to the chase. The question the officer asks, "Where are you coming from?" That is not a casual question. It's phase 1 of a formal DWI investigation, and I'm going to prove it to you. The National Highway Traffic and Safety Administration publishes the official manual for training for every officer in this country for DWI detection. It's called the DWI Detection and Standardized Field Sobriety Testing Manual. I've read it. I've cross-examined officers on it, and on page after page, it instructs officers to use this casual conversational language as a warm-up period to get you talking. And you know what's one of their first techniques that they use in what they call a pre-exit interview? It instructs the officers to always ask casual, open-ended conversational questions like, "Where are you headed? Where are you coming from tonight? What you've been up to?" Although it sounds like small talk, the NHTSA manual actually scripts these out for the cops. That officer's been trained in a classroom with the manual to ask you that exact question with that exact tone, acting like it's not a big deal. And here's the part that really seems like a trick. They're trained to ask you that question, those series of questions, before they tell you why they actually pulled you over. Think about it. If the officer says, "Well, I actually pulled you over for swerving," well, now you know what this is all about. Now you can tailor your answer. But if instead he says, "Where are you coming from tonight?" it throws you off guard and you're not really sure where he's coming from. So, since you have no idea what he's looking for, you start talking, and the truth and you being upfront now becomes a trap. But let me unpack how this trap actually works, because it's not just one question. It's a sequence, and every answer you give opens the next door. Let's say you answer honestly. "I was just coming from down here at a friend's house." Sounds harmless, right? Well, here's what the cop actually hears. You were out socializing. It's pretty late at night. You were at a private residence. Good chance there was alcohol present. He didn't need to smell anything, and he didn't need to actually see anything. You painted the picture for him, but that's just the first door. Because here comes door number 2. "At a friend's house, huh? How long were you there?" Now the officer is painting a timeline. If you say a few hours, then you had plenty of time to drink. But if you say you just stopped by, now you're just not being honest. You see, there's no good answer to this question because the question isn't designed to have a good answer. It's designed to capture evidence. But then comes door number 3. "Okay, so you were at a friend's house. You spent a few hours there. Did you have anything to drink while you were there?" And now the trap is sprung, because if you say yes, even to 1 beer, you've just made an admission. If you say no, and the cop leans in and says, "I think I smell alcohol," now all of a sudden you're a liar. And let me tell you something. Cops have been trained on here. They know that the only thing that jurors hate more than drinkers are liars when asked about a drink. I can see it now. The prosecutor standing in front of the jury saying, "Ladies and gentlemen, that defendant lied to that police officer's face. What else is he lying about?" But here's the Easter egg here that most people, including lawyers, don't know about. The reason the officer is trained to ask you the question, "Where are you coming from?" is not primarily because he cares where you're coming from. The real reason, and they teach this at the academy, is something called divided attention. See, when an officer walks up to your window, he's not just listening to your words. He's watching your body language as you process the answer to his question. Can you retrieve your license and answer his question at the same time? Like, can you maintain a conversation while your hands are doing something else? Because the inability to perform two tasks simultaneously is written down in his DWI training manual as a sign of impairment. So it's not about your answer, it's about watching you while you answer. They're testing your brain before they ask you to ever get out of the car. That question by itself is a field sobriety test. It was a test you didn't even know you were taking. But here's where it gets even more twisted, and this is the second little Easter egg most people don't know. Let's say you're smart, and let's say you answer perfectly, and you say, "I'm just coming home from work." Clean answer, no red flags, you definitely passed, but the officer's not done. Because now he's going to use your answer against you in a completely different way. If you say you're coming home from work, he's going to then ask you what you do, not because he cares, but because he wants you to keep talking. Every additional second of conversation is another moment he gets to observe your eyes, your speech patterns, whether he hears any slurred speech, or maybe you're a little slow in response to his questions. The officers are trained to extend this conversation so that the longer you talk, the more data they can collect, and the more they can justify in that police report why they believe you lost the normal use of your mental faculties because of alcohol. Red eyes, check. Maybe a slurred word, check. Maybe you stumbled over your words for a moment, check. Every single thing you say goes into their report. And then here's the one that makes my blood boil as a defense attorney. You've been cooperative. You answered the officer's questions, but then they write this down in their report. The driver was overly talkative and provided excessive detail about their evening, which is consistent with impairment. Or, if you don't answer with enough detail, they're then trained to write this. The driver was unusually quiet and provided minimal responses, which is consistent with impairment. So, if you talk too much, that's a sign of impairment. If you don't talk enough, that's also a sign of impairment. Their training is designed so that no matter what you do, it could be seen as evidence of your impairment. Now, I don't know about you, but that's not really an investigation. That's a story where the ending's already been written. So now I know what you're thinking. You're saying, "Jeff, look, this sounds impossible. I can't talk, but I can't stay quiet. What are the specific words I'm supposed to use here?" "Officer, I'm exercising my right not to answer any questions. Is there anything you need from me regarding the reason for this stop?" That's it. Those two sentences. And now I'm going to break down why those words matter so much. You saying you refuse to answer any questions makes it unequivocal that you're exercising your right to remain silent, which makes it now legally impossible for the officer to try to claim that you left some room open for him to come back and ask you more questions or twist your words. But then now is the power move. Is there something you'd need from me regarding the reason for this stop? This question redirects the entire conversation back to the traffic violation. If the cop pulled you over for going 5 over, that's now the only legal basis he has to keep you sitting on the side of that road. And the power move you're making is that no officer could claim you're being a jerk or being uncooperative means you're intoxicated. When you turn around and say, "Is there anything you need from me regarding that speeding allegation?" And here's the critical piece. You refusing to answer that cop's questions can never be used as any evidence against you whatsoever. In other words, the cop can't write down, "Well, he didn't tell me where he was coming from, so I knew he was drunk." United States versus Bigham, U.S. versus Wood, state after state, federal court after federal court has ruled you exercising a constitutional right can never be used as reasonable suspicion or probable cause by cops for any reason whatsoever. So when you say, "I refuse to answer any questions," you're putting the officer in a legal box. It's the only thing he can do is finish that traffic stop and write you that speeding ticket, because he certainly cannot legally continue to extend a DWI investigation. But what happens when the officer pushes back and says, "I'm just asking a simple question here, buddy. It's not that big of a deal"? That's when you look back at him and say, "I understand, officer, but I'm exercising my rights. Is there anything else you need from me from the stop, or am I free to leave?" It's simple, it's polite, and you've redirected that officer legally back to the traffic stop. And if the officer gets angry and he demands that you get out of the car, remember under the Supreme Court case of Pennsylvania versus Mims, the officer almost always will come up with some reason to claim his officer's safety is at risk. So if he forces you out of the car, you maintain and exercise your right to remain silent. And you do not have to cooperate with any other questions that he might pose to you while you're sitting there on the side of the road. And always refuse consent to search your vehicle. And then, here's the final piece that ties everything together. Always remember this. A traffic stop is not a conversation. It might feel like one, and the officer is trained to make you think it is one, but it's really a criminal investigation where the rules and the training of the cop are stacked against you. They're not made to help you unless you exercise your constitutional rights. So now you know the exact words to use when a cop looks at you and asks where you're coming from. But what if this enrages the officer, and instead of turning around and walking away, he looks back at you and says, "Now I know you're on something. I'm calling for the drug dog." Check out this next video where I break down the exact phrase you can use to shut cops down when they claim they're going to call a drug dog.